Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is an interview with His Honour Chief Justice John Macrossan for the Griffith History, taped at the Supreme Court Brisbane on Monday the 12th of February 1996 with Dr. Noel Quirk.
Mr. Justice Dunn of this court on the council. I was invited to join after he died. That, I might say, is why I think it was 83, but you'll find that out.
Right.
And then, you'll get all this readily enough, I became Deputy Chancellor when Sir Theodore gave up his role as Chancellor, and Alan became Chancellor. I became Deputy Chancellor, and that, I'm told, was March 85, and you'll see that.
Yes.
And I was in that position then until everything happens in March, according to this. I was appointed Chancellor in March of 1988. So I got March on the brain. But anyhow, they're the years, all right, so they're the years I cover. The biggest issue in my relatively early years as Chancellor, it would have been about, I think it might have been the end of 88, I don't think I'd be Chancellor for long, was when Griffith had to decide whether it wished to amalgamate under the Dawkins pressures with all of the colleges of advanced education dotted around Brisbane. You probably know about this issue a bit, don't you? And there were some within the council who thought we should, and the conflicting view, the opposing view, was that that would be rather unwise, in effect that we might be swamped as an institution by taking so much on board, but everyone in the end agreed that it would be appropriate to sort of expand and mop out Mount Gravatt. But the view that we adhered to was that we shouldn't take up all the others.
Yes. Well, can I interrupt here?
Yes, please.
Was there a sense at that time that Griffith might itself be in some danger or peril from the Dawkins plan?
Not itself of being swooped upon by someone else, no.
Not even in the sense that it had it was desirable for it to attain these certain levels, I think.
Ah, yes. We had that in mind. That's right. Those levels were relevant, weren't they? For lots of other institutions were subjected to the same pressure. I've forgotten what the cut-off lines were. Would I be right in thinking 7,000, or am I overdoing it? You'll find this anyhow.
There was, I think, one level. I have it in the file, so my memory is not with it entirely, but I think 5,000 was one level, and then to be regarded and funded as a reasonable sized institution, it was 8,000.
8 was it? And is that what we were aiming to get? Aiming to get 8? And did you might remind me, see whether my impression's correct, Mount Gravatt took us to the 8 at the time? Yeah.
Yes.
We've certainly grown. It's absolutely remarkable, isn't it?
Oh.
From a one-campus institution with a small number, small student body, up to where we are today. Yes, all right. But there were some very long debates in council associated with that. I think I'm correct in saying that we might have gone up to midnight with some of our meetings. We used to start until 7:30 in those days, but they were very difficult, and there was a lot of there were opposing viewpoints to contemplate, and there was sharp differences of opinion within council.
What would you have described? How would you have described the university when you first became Chancellor, as opposed to now? What sort of a culture and ethos did it have, and what does it have now? Or has
yes. Well, it was smaller, it was more comfortable, there was more the sense that everyone had some reasonable knowledge of the other groups, each group. I think there was also more of a sense that although it had a fine range of courses, it had a narrow range of courses. Its scope was much narrower. It was very much an institution offering something different from the other institutions, and although it would still, I think, like to think that that's so, it also embraces a more standard range in the course it covers as well now, I think. There are still some gaps, of course.
Yeah. Was it very regarded or perceived? Did its image include a strong degree of radicalism, which I seem to remember from very early in the piece?
I think it would be fair to say that there was, compared with the other two institutions, they were both settled there by the time I came on the council. Compared with them, it would have been regarded as a more radical institution.
And while you've been there, have you consciously or unconsciously felt a need to possibly follow or possibly lead the community in a more vocationally and...
Yes, I think so. I remember in early years, to take an example, I don't want to sound narrow about this by talking about law, but that is a specifically good example. The community at one stage was very resistant to undertaking conventional law studies, professionally qualifying law studies. It wanted to do related things, legal studies they called it, which was not a professionally qualifying course. But that didn't win the day, although there was a fairly strong feeling that that's what we should be doing, and not just another university with another standard law course. But I think it's been important to add some more standard courses to our repertoire, including a professional one like this, and I suppose nursing's another, recent and very different sort of example, because that in itself is novel, but at least it's of a more professional kind. Yes, there was resistance, I think, to doing anything which was directly vocational, because the feeling was that that was covered by other institutions.
There is another, I don't want to make it sound as if I'm harping on contentious issues. God knows that amalgamations themselves, when it comes to those, are contentious enough, but there is also, I think, a need to follow the progression of the university. And I've been told by a person who was extremely radical and involved in the ethos of the very earliest days of the university, that now he feels that well, as you've described, law studies as an example of what they were doing generally, especially in humanities and some of the other areas, was in fact, in retrospect, the very sort of intellectual elitism that they were overtly trying to say they weren't doing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Would you think that was a reasonable sort of a comment to make overall?
I don't know that I'd put it that way. I think that there were certainly strong feelings held that we should avoid the merely conventional, and I think, and the university deserves immense credit for structuring itself with its Asian studies and with its environmental studies in the early days.
Yes.
The extent to which they were very different, quotes, studies has been diluted a bit now, because others have in effect followed suit. But that was a large proportion of our endeavour, of course, wasn't it, in the early days? We added science and humanities, but that was a large proportion, the two of the starting four schools.
And they have both, particularly environmental science, has become part at the leading edge virtually of that discipline.
Yeah.
And they had to virtually create what it was. They had to define what environmental science was, I believe, according to Professor Rose.
One of the problems, I don't know that I'd want you to put this in the book in quite this form, one of the problems that Griffith has had to deal with over the years is the community's perception of it, and I think that might be related to the radical element that you mentioned immediately. QUT, I think, has chosen a more conventional course to more directly determine to achieve public acceptance, but Griffith has probably tried to maintain to an extent the academic purity of its original concepts, etc. Now, don't put this in the book, but I think, it's not in this form, but I think that the community's view of QUT might be more supportive and more understanding of that institution than it is of Griffith.
Yeah.
But I think that academically, the reverse is true. I think that throughout Australia, the acceptance and the level of approval of Griffith, we don't have nasty comparisons.
No.
Would be higher. Another thing I think that the university suffered from in terms of public acceptance is the fact that it's an invisible institution.
Yeah.
It's buried in the Toohey forest. And there are many people, a huge proportion of people in Brisbane who would never have seen it.
Yeah. That's very true. John Topley, for instance, feels that the original possibility of having the university over the Roma Street railway yards would have been a much better choice. Do you think that has been a very significant disadvantage
in shaping its character?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't have thought so, other things being equal, but then another element that's overtaken Griffith in recent years is the strong conservationist leanings of big influential groups in the community. So that the original plan for a place conserving areas of forest, of course, but also utilising available space, has ended up with a severely cramped, because there's the strong notion that the original plan should not be fully carried out and we should preserve vast tracts of forest that were originally to be utilised. Now that might turn out to be not the disadvantage it otherwise could have been, because we are expanding campuses anyhow, and in the immediate future now there's going to be no special need to expand Nathan. Well, we're going to Logan, for example, critically. But if we hadn't chosen that course for our future, I think we would be very severely handicapped in the necessary expansions for the university by the new consciousness of conservation issues. But any awkwardness that might have, and the tension between those two ideas, I think is largely removed by the fact that we've gone multi-campus and that we're going to expand at Logan.
Just this afternoon, I was talking to somebody at the university, and with the change of government, there is a possibility that maybe Logan might come under threat. Is there any validity? I mean,
I have seen statements suggesting that various influential people, including perhaps people in the government, regret the choice of Logan and think it would have been better a bit further south. Logan is, of course, physically a pretty good site in many ways. It's got the cleared area, it's got a large area of land. You no doubt have seen the proposal of the consultants. It's got access to the road, to the railway station, to the hospital, those sorts of things. They're all very good features. And although it could have gone, and some people say it should have gone a little further south, I think the mayor of Gold Coast, for example, and I don't know if he wants to be quoted on this, thinks it should have gone in B. Lee, which I think is the northern limit of his empire. But I don't know about that. It's a matter of judging the sites physically, I think. And then if we'd gone further south, it might intrude unnecessarily onto the Gold Coast campus. So, I don't know. But the main population, I think, is at the more northern end, and Logan is in the middle of an area, I don't say underprivileged, but so far very slightly catered for, isn't it? There isn't enough there. But then we're moving into an era where, with
with the way education is to be handled in the future, there may not need to be all these numerous campuses with vast investments and physical establishments. You've probably got a view about that yourself. It's hard to read the future exactly, but that is a new matter to be taken into account, isn't it?
I expect that there will be an element where the technology will preclude the need for such enormous expense, and obviously the expense involved in buildings and campuses is a huge drain on the resources. But the degree to which you can transfer the ability to teach effectively,
yes,
through technology alone, I just don't know enough about this.
Yes. You think it will remain true that you'll need a community centre for the students? I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, you've always had the possibility of learning by correspondence, to take a very simple example. But no one has ever doubted that the school with the congregation of scholars is the more effective way to go. And I think that must surely be part of the future as well.
It would be mine, but I mean, I'm getting to the age and stage where I probably look nostalgically on some of the more traditional institutions as well. But I think no matter which way one tries to be historically and academically objective about it, I fail to see how you can achieve the end result of a good rounded education without a modicum at least of contact within some sort of cohesive community.
I think that's so. If an institution can provide it, such things as meetings with tutors is extraordinarily helpful and much better than distance lectures transmitted to large passive groups.